Just go ahead and take a minute to get set up while we wait for people to trickle in. If you want to go ahead and get us started, I'd love to know where you're at in the world, where you're joining us from, and if you care to share where you're at in the curriculum, if you're in launch school at all. Let's see. Austin, Texas, cool, RB110. Canada, just getting started, awesome, welcome. Okay, we have Chris, Chase, Sophia, Tom. There's Yulia. Michael, Chicagoland. Sonora from Mexico. Awesome. RB120, RB119. Lots of Ruby trackers here. It's great. All right. Let's give everyone a few minutes to trickle in before we get started. For those of you who are just joining, you can drop into the chat if you'd like, where you're from, where you're at in the Launch School curriculum. You can also feel free to use the chat during the webinar today. Happy to see conversation and thoughts and things being shared there. We'll also be using the Q&A feature more towards the end, but if you want to start dropping questions in there, if you have them prepared, that's great too. I'll be taking a look through those, filtering through those as we go. A few familiar faces, familiar names. All right, well, it is 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. And if you join us a little late, that's okay. We won't be getting into the super juicy stuff right away. We'll talk about what we're going to do. So today, we're first just going to hear from Chris to share a bit of the big picture of kind of why he's chosen to dedicate so much time and resources into building LSBot. LSBot was released for the general public a whole week ago, and it's been super awesome to see all of the different ways that it's been used. It's taken a lot of work to get it to this point, and the work will not stop. So it's only uphill from here. We're going to keep going, keep pushing. And so we'll hear from him a bit about why he saw this as kind of the big next step for Launch School. And then we're really excited to hear from 4 of the current Launch School students and 1 capstone prep student, which is really cool. And they're going to share with us what they've learned so far and how they've kind of incorporated LSBot into their studies and why they chose to keep using it. And finally, we will take some questions at the end if time permits. So we'll start by hearing from Chris. If you missed it, as I mentioned, you can feel free to use the chat. I'll be keeping an eye there, but feel free to share your thoughts there. And also the Q&A feature, you can drop questions in there and I'll be keeping an eye there. And I think that's all the housekeeping I needed to mention. So I will pass it over to Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hey, yeah. I'll just do a quick spiel about how we got here. What I won't talk about the future too much, but there's a Q&A at the end. Feel free to ask if you would like. I'm really excited to actually see the panelists here share sort of their experience with LSBot. So I thought I'd just kind of give it like a really quick catch up over the last couple of years, what's been happening behind the scenes in terms of our work towards AI. So AI is like a very old topic. It's ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022. But that's not like when AI started. So the like for me personally, I worked on in an AI lab as an undergrad, 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. But there was a what they call AI winter, and it wasn't until some intrepid entrepreneurs went and just decided to throw compute at these old ideas, along with some innovations, that really unlocked what we see today with ChatGPT and Claude, Anthropic, and all that. So fast forward to 2022 when ChatGPT came out, it was quite exciting. And it was especially exciting for me because it felt like it was going to affect the intersection of two things that where I operate, right? Where Launch School operates, which is really education and software engineering. So it immediately caught my attention from just that standpoint. I pay attention to, I feel like all the major, trends and in tech, like crypto. I attended crypto conferences, even talked to many people about setting up, putting like, for example, certification on the blockchain or having a launch school token, or there's a lot of interesting talk around that several years ago. But when AI came out, I just felt there was like an immediate application. Didn't the search for application was more immediate, right? And fast forward to 2023, I started going to AI conferences. I went to one in particular in San Francisco in October. It really, really sort of afterwards, I just decided to sort of go all in on this, not just kind of explore. And part of the reason for that is because I really felt that given the developments in AI, it gave us a chance here at launch school to address the classic Two Sigma problem. So this is a problem where, if we can fast forward yeah. So this is a article published by Benjamin Bloom back in 1984. And he's an educational person, psychologist, a psychiatrist, a researcher, who identified this problem, and it's articulated as a problem because it is actually a search for a solution. And so, if you go to the next slide, um, the problem looks like this. It's a graph, right? So the visual, if you can see the labeling there, the first curve is classic education, classic conventional classes. The second curve there is mastery-based learning. So it's about what we do at launch school, right, in the core curriculum. And so that's one standard deviation more effective pedagogy. So we knew this back in 1984, right? How many mastery-based education systems do we have now? Not many. But he identified yet another modality, pedagogical approach that is yet another one standard deviation better than even mastery-based learning, two standard deviations better than conventional classes, which is one-on-one tutoring. And after attending that conference, I realize that AI is basically at a place where I can see that we are able to get to that potentially, right? We're still in an evolving space. Things are moving quickly, but it felt to me like there was something here that we can move yet another standard deviation to the right there and unlock even more effectiveness when it comes to education, right? Um, and I thought, wow, what a wonderful time to be in education and be a software engineer, right? If you're just in education, you don't have the ability to build anything. If you're just a software engineer, you're thinking about what can we do with this ability? And I just thought, we have a school, right? We have a whole thing here, and it is such a great opportunity for us to push in this direction. And so in 2024, we spent a ton of time this year prototyping, building, studying best practices. Everything's growing in-house. Somebody DM me is like, what product did you guys use? If you haven't noticed, we build stuff. I mean, we don't just train software engineers. I consider myself a software engineer slash builder first and foremost. I do not consider myself really an educator. My partner is a legit educator, and when I see what that is, what that looks like, I know I'm not it. Um, but also that has some cons, right? So on the downside, I'm not a great educator. But on the plus side, I can apply what I am good at, what I'm passionate about, to education. And so we launched a private alpha or beta, whatever you want to call it, in July of this year. Ran through a lot of issues, but people seemed to have a good time, extracted lessons and patterns, and then went back to sort of the shop, and built some more. So we've been spending an incredible amount of energy and resources working on this. I know it just looks like a little chat thing, but there's a lot of complexity there. A lot of the lessons learned over the past year, we're actually going to take and teach. some of it in capstone, right? And then I'm sure you'll see some of it trickle down to the core curriculum as well into the future. So I'm super excited about this. This is a new thing. Everyone's learning how to do it. What's the best practice, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like we're on the cutting edge of all of that. We're participating in a lot of conversations with these infrastructure providers, uh, learning from our peers who are developing, building AI systems, and also giving them some feedback in terms of our experiences. So it's been exciting to do that as well. So, but this graph here really captures the end goal here for us, as a school. We're trying to get to that 2 sigma. We're trying to find a solution for this 30-year problem, right? This is 1984 published, and they're searching for a solution. It's a problem. And I think we potentially have an answer here, at least in our uh, um, narrow education realm of software education. So that's where we are. That's where I feel like we're, what we're trying to do here. And yeah, I'm super excited about it. And that's the direction we'll be pushing forward on.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I always get super excited whenever you talk about LSBot and AI and stuff. It's just really invigorating to hear you speak about it. And I think there's also some like different thoughts that people have, like maybe they're not going to use it because they'd rather go to a study session and like they think that we're trying to like get rid of TAs, and that's not the point at all. Like the point is to be able to give people this one-on-one tutor experience. And also live TAs like that can't be replaced. But I think it's just so cool to like see that perspective and
Yeah,
hear
you
about
see
it.
that curve. Like if you're on the bottom end of that one-on-one curve, you're actually not better than a conventional class. So it doesn't work for everybody, right? But the goal is like we're trying to do it for the average person who's here, right? And you're gonna have if you're average in a conventional class, potentially you can have a 2 standard deviation better experience in this environment. That's the goal.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, so now let's move on to our speakers, because if you're attending this webinar, then obviously you're already interested, but maybe you haven't been quite so sure about like how to get started, or what types of questions to ask or how to incorporate it into your study sessions, whether by yourself or with others. So we're going to hear from some people who have been super active, really inspiring, have like come up with new ways to use LSBot, have used it in really great ways. So we will start with Sophia. She's going to talk about a few things. Um, oh, that's weird. Is there? Oh, I see. It's got transitions on. Whoops. So she's going to talk first about just some of her favorite ways to use LSBot, some really clever things. And then also there's this issue of there being inaccuracies. And sometimes that kind of throws people. They're like, well, how am I supposed to use this tool if sometimes it gets it wrong? Sometimes it tells me things that just aren't true. But there's actually some really great approaches, and sometimes it can even be helpful, right? So I'll pass it over to you, Sophia, if you're ready to go.
Great. Thank you, Brandy. So, hi everyone. I'm Sophia. I am in RB 109 and preparing to take the 110 written assessment. And I first started using LSBot in Core Live back in August. And initially, I was hesitant to try it out and I was unsure of the best ways to use LSBot. But since then, it's been really an immense help in my studies. So, I'd love to share with you some of my favorite ways to use LSBot. Next slide, please. So firstly, I really like to use it to generate practice problems and mock quizzes. And I find this to be helpful when I'm preparing to take an assessment or once I'm done with all the material in a course. And it's especially great when I want to drill more practice problems that I haven't seen before. So you can ask LSBot to vary the style, the topic, and the difficulty level of the questions. So you can really make it tailored to your specific needs. Next slide. I also like to use it for language precision checks and evaluations of my code explanations. And I like to do this when preparing for a written assessment to make sure that my explanations are thorough, accurate, and concise. Sometimes I like to make multiple revisions and send them back to LSBot to reevaluate so that I can improve my technical language as much as possible. And LSBot usually gets pretty detailed in its feedback, which I find to be very helpful as well. Next slide. And finally, I really love to ask LSBot for coding challenges and to give me code reviews. And what I enjoy about this is that LSBot will not only tell me in detail what I did well in my code and how I can improve, but it can also give me clues about different ways of solving the problem, which helps me to improve my problem-solving skills and helps me to think outside of the box in terms of the code that I write. Next slide. So now let's talk about what to do if LSBot makes a mistake or misguides you and some strategies to manage that. So firstly, LSBot can get very simple and straightforward things wrong, like whether a method is mutating or not. So in this example, you can see that LSBot gave me a few different mutating and non-mutating method examples, and I was pretty certain about the behavior of all of these methods besides one, and that was the concat method. LSBot said that it was not mutating, but I was pretty sure that was incorrect. Next slide. So I verified with the Ruby documentation, and it turned out that it was mutating. So I went back to LSBot to confirm, and you can see here that it did end up correcting itself by giving me the updated definition for the method and its behavior, as well as code snippet to demonstrate. So just keep an eye out for very simple things that you might take as a given. Just take everything it says with a grain of salt. Next slide. So LSBot can also misguide you about larger concepts that are more fundamental to the course that you're in. So in this example here, I was discussing local variable scoping rules with LSBot, and I knew the rules pretty much by heart, and I was pretty sure that the information LSBot was giving me here was false. Next slide. So I ended up consulting with the launch school curriculum to double check. And after I went through that, I responded with the material that had ended up contradicting LSBot. And we actually had to go back and forth a few times debating this concept. But as you can see, we did end up coming to the right answer. So I would encourage you to keep following up with LSBot if it continues to be wrong, even after you've verified the answer. It will really help to build your understanding of the topic and your confidence in it as well. Next slide. So managing LSBot's mistakes. If something seems off about its answers, there are many different ways to verify the information. So first, you can continue to question LSBot, narrowing in on specific language or certain details until the bigger picture becomes clear or until you reach the correct answer. You can also check the official documentation for your language, like I have. You can check the launch school curriculum, post in a discussion forum or a Slack channel, or you could even reach out to another student or a study buddy. As for the main takeaways, just be mindful like with any other AI chatbot or even other students, LSBot is constantly learning and adapting, and it will at times get things wrong or contradict itself. So just be careful not to simply take every single thing that it says as a given. And don't be afraid to critique its answers or verify information either externally or with LSBot itself. There are lots of other tools at your disposal to round out your learning experience and make sure that you have all the information you need to succeed at launch school. So that's it for me. Thank you so much, and I'll be sticking around for the Q&A at the end.
Thank you. That's great. I think it's interesting because you're kind of like, well, it's wrong. So like, people can tend to focus on that, but this is just one of the most interesting things that can happen. A lot of the times you like ask it a question, it answers, you move on, and it's giving you that helpful thing. But it's great to have like an approach for when something does go wrong, because it does happen. I think not very often, but enough. And especially if you're learning, then that can bite you. So it's good to pay attention. Okay, next up we have Tom, and Tom has some really great things to talk about with us because he is very busy. So that's one of the things that I really like about his talk is, just how we use LSBot to become more efficient, and kind of goes back to that curve that Chris was talking about. And I think that Tom's done a great job of utilizing that. So take it away, Tom.
All right, thanks, Brandy. So I'm Tom. Currently, I'm in Python 119, trying to get ready for the written assessment. I started using LSBot actually in Core Live in a section that Brandy taught, and found a lot of utility with it. So that was my introduction. Was really excited to see it recently released for everybody. So first topic here, I was asked to speak about whether LSBot has altered my pace. Has it sped up or slowed down? And I think that's an interesting question because I know sometimes with LSBot, I do find it easier to go down a rabbit trail, kind of exploring something that may not really be pertinent to the lesson that I'm on, rather than just staying focused on the problem at hand. But the thing about that is with LSBot, it's all happening right there in Slack. I don't end up, reading a string of different web pages, kind of getting further and further off topic, which is definitely a problem I've had before. And being on a tight time frame, that's really important. In fact, some days I actually have like less than an hour to study, maybe 30 or 40 minutes some days. And sometimes that's even broken up into more than one study session. So, in a session that's that limited, being able to keep moving forward, making progress is really critical for it to make any difference at all. So being able to have LSBot right there, being able to just bounce a quick question off of it rather than kind of going off having to like search through documentation or find in the launch school material where that information is, I found that extremely helpful just to keep me moving forward. And that said, I'm still moving pretty slowly through the courses. Actually, my first son was born 2 days after I started core. So, that along with just work and all the other things that we all have going on, it's been really critical just to make the most of the time that I do have. So, all right, ready to move on to the next topic. Comparing LSBot to other AI tools. So, we all know that there's other options out there, ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini, they're calling it now. It used to be called Bard. And I've used really a few different chatbots to learn, mainly with programming, but a few other things as well. I've actually never tried Claude. But along with Gemini and ChatGPT, I've also used another chatbot that was specifically designed for a programming course, which I took earlier this year before I found Launch School. And that course-specific chatbot, like LSBot, was trained on all the course materials and was meant to be able to help with course-specific questions and issues that could arise. But unlike with LSBot, I found that I actually had a lot of problems. I would say I had more problems than success when trying to use that one. So it's really something I think kind of special that Launch School has managed to do with LSBot. It is not easy to make one of these things helpful. That other bot could actually get easily confused. It would sometimes give broken code if it was asked to produce code. I had it even get argumentative, at one point even sulky, believe it or not. So yeah, definitely a major improvement with LSBot. Now, I do like ChatGPT. I have to say, sometimes I actually still use that. One of the main reasons I use that is if I'm feeling too self-conscious to just ask my question of LSBot in the public forum. Which is that's a me problem, not an LSBot problem. I think as far as quality goes, as far as like the quality of responses and just I guess ease of use, like I find that ChatGPT and LSBot are pretty similar quality for me, but the fact that LSBot is actually trained on all of the course material, now it even knows what lesson we're on. So I just find it much more helpful that way. Now that it's out of beta, I'm hoping to actually get a lot more use out of it. And one thing that's actually been really cool is just to read other people's questions and responses in the forum. Major reason to go ahead and bite the bullet and just post things in public. It's been really helpful just to to be able to glean things from other people's interactions. All right, I think I covered everything. Yeah, thanks, Brandy. And then, so yeah, last topic, becoming reliant on LSBot. So yeah, I definitely, personally, like I definitely haven't become reliant on it. I could see how that could happen if someone was to lean just really heavily into it rather than trying to solve problems on their own. But that's not the way to use it. It's there as a tool, as an adjunct to learning. And that said, I talked earlier about having really limited time, so I found it extremely helpful just to help get me unstuck quickly, so I can keep moving forward. And there was a second part to this question when I was presented with it, which was, do you still do things like read documentation? And actually, that to me is kind of funny, because one of my favorite ways to use LSBot is, well, if you're also on the Python track, you may know that sometimes the Python docs can be a little bit difficult to find what you're looking for. Not always, but sometimes. So just asking the bot can be so much faster. That said, I do still read documentation. I was looking for something earlier today, but and it's super helpful just to be able to use the bot to just get that information and keep cruising. Let's see. Oh, I did want to make one more point. Sophia talked earlier about the fact that not everything you get from LSBot is going to be completely accurate. But something like a simple syntax issue. This is one of my favorite things to ask it. I don't remember the syntax for every little thing. So just, this piece of code doesn't work. Maybe the error message isn't entirely helpful. Just asking it what the issue is. That's immediately testable. Either it's going to give you the correct syntax or it's not. So I love that, just being able to immediately check things. All right, and I think that's all I've got. So thanks so much for your time and attention. I'm gonna pass the talking stick.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, lots of good stuff there. Next, we have Chase, who is actually in Capstone Prep, which is a very busy time. So thank you, Chase, for making time for us. I'm sure it would have been easy to just say no. Also, the example that Chase has to share is a bit more complex. So hopefully Chase will break it down for those of us who don't know TypeScript yet. It'll be unfamiliar, but I think that the lesson from this example is really cool. And I actually remember when this thread happened, being really interested and kind of seeing that it was wrong and being like, oh no, LSBot missed the point. But then it was also correct in a way, and we walked it back and we got to the right answer. And so it was just a really cool lesson, because there's kind of an overall theme at play here. So Chase will tell us more.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Tom and Sophia. I'm going to move a little quickly so as not to repeat anything everyone else has said. But thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. So yeah, I'm going to, but yeah, as Brandy said, I'm in Capstone Prep. I started core about 2 years ago and finished in July. I was lucky enough to start using the LSBot back in, I want to say May, June, and learned quite a few lessons along the way. I'd like to share one example stood out for me in my usage. And I think this is actually the most important slide. So I'm going to let you guys look at it here for a few seconds. And I'm not here to teach anybody TypeScript. So I'm going to give you a second to kind of digest if there is anyone familiar with TypeScript. But I'm going to come back to this. And so at the very end, I'm basically asking, can you tell me which one is better? I get the first half is Launch School provides an answer, and the second half is the one I came up with. And I'm asking, okay, I'm trying to understand the difference between what I did versus what Launch School was suggesting would be the right way to do it. And if there's anybody out there who knows a little bit of TypeScript, I direct your attention to the name of the function and also the first parameter. But I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to address it without trying to get into too many specifics on TypeScript. I'm basically asking why is one better than the other? And then if we move on, we can see, again, we're not going to dive too much into specifics here. LSBot does exactly what I asked it. It's giving me a bunch of pertinent and helpful information, and it's basically trying to break it down for me and give me exactly what I asked. Can you tell me which one's better and why? Here it expounds a lot upon the why. And if we move on a little bit, we can see, okay, it gets to which one is better. It starts getting into the specifics, okay? And it's actually saying my answer is better up at the top. Your approach, array of T, an array of type T is better because, and it starts explaining why, okay? This is great, fantastic. This is exactly what I was looking for. But the question itself, if we can go back to the question, Brandy, the question itself, one more. Okay. The question itself, which one is better? The function is trying to filter by type, and without jumping into too many specifics about TypeScript, basically we're using generics here. The T and the carets are indicating that we're giving a type, or expecting a type, and the function's purpose, if it's named properly, should indicate what it's trying to do. And it's trying to return an array that has only elements of that type. And so my answer down at the bottom, which basically stipulates that the first parameter has to be of type T, it becomes like a completely useless function in my understanding. And so it would have actually been better had the LSBot noticed that I had a misunderstanding of the concepts. And it only dawned on me maybe an hour or two later, but I came back. And if we can skip ahead to that next slide, I basically came back to my original question, realized I'm missing something conceptually here, and I tell it, LSBot, right? I think I misunderstood something, and I think you went along with me here. If the point of the function is to filter by type, then isn't my answer kind of defeating the purpose? And if we move on to the next slide, LSBot basically says, oh gosh, well done. Yeah, you're exactly right, Chase. Okay. And, there's a lot of text here. Don't feel like you have to read it all. So I'm going to move on to the main takeaways, the lesson learned. It's a fantastic tool. It's saved me a lot of time. It's been really quite helpful. But if I could connect it to a comment I heard from an alumni during a talk, people were asked, or some of the students asked, so when do you use these like AI bot and helper tools? And she said, when I know a lot about a subject, the AI tool actually helps more. But when I'm asking it questions about something I don't really know all that well about, it's less helpful. And here I was doing the Intro to TypeScript course. At that point, I hadn't passed the assessment. I was still very much a beginner. And so as my one case indicates, right, I asked a question that lacked understanding, and it was in doing so that it was almost not as helpful as it could have been. Okay, so the takeaways here are, the more information you can provide in your question, the more opportunities you're going to give the LSBot to basically find inaccuracies and fallacies in your thinking, or gaps. And then I would strongly suggest that rather than asking, as like I did in my question, which one's better, which one's worse, using this broad language that's not all very specific, focus on really honing in on, with accurate language, as much as you can and avoid judgment-based questions. So better, worse. And last but not least, right? I think what I did was create a false dichotomy. I said, here are two options. Can you choose the better one for me, or explain why it's better? But in reality, I was kind of asking it, something that didn't quite make sense. So I would avoid using those either ors if you can, and focus on confirmation of understanding with very technically accurate language as you can. Yeah, so those are the key takeaways. I'm going to pass it off to the next.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. Yeah, that's a really interesting problem. And if you didn't quite follow what was going on there, I think that a simple beginner example is maybe asking LSBot something like, what's the difference between an if branch and an else clause? This very fine-grained, what's the difference? And LSBot, in some cases, it'll say they're equivalent, don't worry about it. But in a lot of cases, it's going to be this person wants, which one is better? What is the answer? And it's going to try and give you an answer. And then sometimes even further down the thread, build up this kind of, fake scenario. So yeah, a lot of good advice there and something to just watch out for. Okay, up next we have Yulia, who has been a super active LSBot user ever since I think Prep Live or Core Live, I'm not sure. She'll share with us, but she has a few more questions to answer for us based on her experience.
Thank you, Brandy. My name is Yulia, and I'm in RB 109 course. I'm preparing for the written assessment. Please, next slide. I will tell a little bit how I started to do this, to use LSBot and why. So I came to Core Life with a huge gap of knowledge, and I think that maybe I understood maybe 20% of what is written in the course. So I was in plateau, and in addition, after the first workshop, I understood how much things that I need to learn. And when LSBot was introduced, I started to use it right away. I was so excited that that is a huge opportunity that I can use to ask all my questions. I had lots of them. And then I started to use it for terms clarifications, concepts clarifications, generated exercises for myself to do, and reviews of concepts and the code explanations. Most important that together with other students in Core Life, we use it in our study group sessions. That was super helpful. So we generated several codes for ourselves and provided for each other to solve problems on the spot or to answer the questions on the spot, as it gives us more opportunity to practice more. And if the output were not as we expected, or we didn't understand why is the return value that we thought it would be, we go to LSBot and ask a question, why it is that? That's a way, then we read, then we discuss why it is that. If we feel that we have a huge gap in our knowledge, then after the study session, we come back. So I come back to this concept and start to explore more and generate more questions for myself to practice. Please, next slide. So as I started to use LSBot, some thoughts came to my mind. The first one was not so comfortable, and I would like to share with everyone that I don't know so many things, and now everyone will see that in the channel. So that was like this, but I continued to use LSBot every day and during all my time that I have, because all the concepts are very cool and they're so great and nice that I can so great opportunity to to explore more and know more. And then with that knowledge, I can move forward. I ask very simple questions because English is my second language. Of course, many terms were not familiar for me, and this is okay. So as I explored pass-by reference pass-by value concept, I needed to ask even what is pass-by, what is reference, what is value, and even why do we need to study this concept, and why is that example in this specific assignment. And this is okay, that helped me to move forward. And continuing to use LSBot, of course, I felt that sometimes I may be misguided. So sometimes I had a roller coaster with my feelings several times a day. And that was during several months. But my desire to go to my goal, to prepare for the assessment, it was stronger than anything that has not went as I expected sometime. That is okay. Sometimes, as Sofia said, this can be, and it's like learning experience for be confident in your knowledge. Because I argued with the LSBot a lot. So I was like, oh no, I will tell you what is the right way to answer. That is okay because it's not a human. So this way I practiced to really understand that I really understand the topic. And that is a great way to check your knowledge. And this is a great way to learn how to make arguments for what you would like to say. So the last thing that I would like to say, that it is great that LSBot has something to say all the time. Sometimes as people have to say all the time and have lots of comments on any comment. That is great that LSBot has, because sometimes I feel that, oh, I didn't know that. That is great that I now aware of some things, some tricky things, and that makes me even more confident in the knowledge that I received. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Yulia. Lots of great points there. I think one of the most important ones is that LSBot doesn't need to just be something that you use on your own. Sometimes we have study sessions with our peers and it's very awkward in the first 5 minutes because no one knows what to do. And now we have this facilitator that can act, sometimes even like a spot lead or a TA to just help get things started. And, posting in the public channel, I know everyone, wants to know about privately doing this, and we'll probably talk about that during the Q&A. But I would like to encourage people to do things publicly because it really creates this camaraderie, and you get to learn from each other and read each other's answers. And one of the things I always talk about with Launch School is that no one here is too cool for school. Like we all signed up to be here. And that's one of the great things about everyone's attitude. And that's also one of the reasons that we should all feel really comfortable sharing in public channels and asking questions, even if they feel silly or if it feels like something that we don't know. And in software, you're always going to have people who know more than you. So it's great to get comfortable with that feeling and comfortable asking questions. So using it with your peers, I think, is a great thing that we can continue to push and hopefully build more tools to make that even a better experience. So that's all of our fellow students who have shared their experiences. So we can move on to a bit of Q&A. I already have some questions. I think some people dropped things in the chat, which is okay. I'll throw those questions out there. If you have questions for Chris or for the students who have been using LSBot, either way, go ahead and drop your questions. And I think we can go ahead and get started with this first one. If LSBot is corrected. This one's for you, Chris. Will it remember the correct answer when someone else asks the same question? Does its memory persist between Slack channels?
Probably not in the way that you imagine. I think memory is something that even the foundational models, the frontier models don't do. And so maybe ChatGPT does a little bit. I don't know. But it's we use it to perform evaluations the on the LLM on the back end. So, and then when we send your query over to the LLM, and maybe I don't know if people realize this, we are using like ChatGPT, OpenAI models and Anthropic models behind the scenes. So we did not train a model ourselves. So and like 99% of like AI systems you use are like that, right? Because it costs like billions of dollars to do so. Um, so when we send it over, we give them examples. We'll say like, here's some good examples, here's some bad examples. So it may be in quote unquote memory that way, right? So if you ask a question about, just like variable hoisting, for example, and it's a very common phenomenon that people um, uh, ask like in a particular way that always gets a wrong response. We might say we might then add it as an example whenever this particular question comes up and say this question's actually meaning this. So here's an example where like you answer incorrectly last time. Don't do that again. That type of thing. Right? So it's not memory the way that you're probably thinking of, which is like my personal interaction with LSBot. However, I do think that that is something in the future that we want to explore. And if there's a way to have it be even more customized to you, I do think though that people will be like, well, so sometimes I don't want all my stuff remembered, right? Or injected into there every time I ask a question. And sometimes I think it'd be very helpful. It's like, hey, remember yesterday I asked, I was talking about this. Um, and if we do have memory, I think it just automatically unlocks so many features like Anki. People use Anki. Well, LSBot could just be like built-in Anki, right? It's just like, hey, I noticed last time you got it wrong when I quizzed you. I'm gonna ask you again in 2 weeks, right? I'm like, cool. I don't have to even write it down. I don't have to do my own Anki system. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with memory. We don't have that at the moment in the way you envision, but we do reuse um, your exchanges with LSBot in a more general way for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Great. Why don't we address what everyone wants to know about using LSBot privately? Is that something that's coming? Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah, over DMs. That'll be next year sometime. There's additional issues with DMs that we have to kind of work through. Um, right now, whenever we do things, we have a lot of guidance for you, right? We're like, do this, well, don't do that. Watch out for this, watch out for that. LSBot's so new right now that we don't have a lot of guidance. Like we're doing this panel partly because of that. Before we switch to DMs, I would love to collect more patterns and guidance for people. Right, because then it's harder for our staff to see what's going on and just jump in there, right? Like sometimes you can see somebody doing something, and even the other students jump in too, right? I saw Tom jump in there a couple times, right? It's just like, hey, you forgot to tag LSBot, or like like ask it this way or that way, or there's some bugs, right? Sometimes people are using it and it doesn't recognize our profile or something, and so it's easy for us to look at that and say, oh yeah, that we got to fix that bug. DMs just makes it a little bit harder, that's all. So we have the capability, it's just that we're trying to set people up for success when they go to DMs. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Right. Here's an interesting question that came in. How much launch school specific information does the bot use? How much frame of reference does it have for talking to it with the context of launch school?
How much? I mean, we give it basically everything except for assessments, including we fed it a lot of Reddit posts, we fed it a lot of blog posts. even transcripts of our podcasts. I mean, we give it a lot of information. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my I think the most interesting features is that there is so much launch school material. I mean, people ask us the same questions over and over and over again, and they're answered over and over and over again in hundreds of different places, but you have to find it. Or maybe there's like a launch school podcast from like 3 years ago that's exactly your situation. You're like, I don't know, working full time and have a child, and I don't know, there's something very precise and you want to know, like, is it possible? And now all of a sudden, someone besides like the person who recorded that episode knows where that is and can pull it for you. So there's so much more than even one person would be able to consume, right, during their time at launch school. So I think that's a huge value
Yeah,
of
Medium posts.
LSBot.
You know, one thing we don't do is we don't do Slack conversations. Maybe we should. I don't know, but I don't know. In my mind, I feel like that's a little bit unexpected, right? If you have but if you write a blog post, you know, if it's in there, people probably won't get offended.
Yeah, if you've made a launch school article, then it might quote you to help someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. This kind of relates to that. Since the inputs and outputs of launch school students' interactions with LSBot are in a public Slack channel, is there any thought about aggregating or using that data somehow to form any kind of useful wiki, FAQ, or something else like that?
I want to point people to the user guide that we have for LSBot. It's becoming more and more useful as we update it, as we extract patterns from observing usage. So again, we're very early here, right? And I hesitate to produce any like a lot of documentation until again we observe more usage. And also we're improving LSBot, or let's just say iterating LSBot. There could be regression, right? We're iterating LSBot constantly, and so you know it could change. And also just non-deterministic in nature, right? So you can say like, hey, check out this conversation. You try, you're like, they didn't give me that. Um, so yeah, anytime you know something's useful, we definitely try to save it. We try to extract it. But for now, I would say look, read the user guide carefully. I think it's really well done. A lot of people here participated in that. And there's a lot of good tips in there. I think when I read it, I was like, this is amazing. So
Okay, let's clear the air around assessments because I think there's a lot of confusion, and Ref was asking about discussing assessment question revisions. And actually in the rollout, some of the first questions were, can you make me assessment prep questions? And the LSBot was like, no, and we were like, yes, you can.
yeah.
It was
So we
whoops, but
loosened that. So we initially was like, we don't want people to ask assessment questions. So, but then LSBot was like, I can't do anything. And people were just like, I just want practice questions. You know, I don't want the actual questions. So we loosened that. So now it's responding to like, sure, I'll make some practice exercises for you. Now, keep in mind, LSBot does not have access to assessment questions. So it's taken a guess. It's taken a guess based on the user study guide, based on the course curriculum. So you know, I'm trying to make it useful, right? But don't look at it and say, well, this problem is way different, you know, or something like that. That seems to be a very common and popular request, and I feel like we probably need to do a lot more work around it in terms of now we might need to create a study guide for LSBot only for assessments, for example, right? In terms of how to like we have one for students, but we'll give LSBot that, but maybe we might need to create another one. We'll see. We'll see. Um, you know, again, just launched. We'll let complaints drive what we do here. But so far the major complaint was like it's not responding to any of my requests for practice questions. We definitely loosened that up a little bit, right? But don't look at it as like, oh, these are assessment questions, right? Or like, hey, the assessments were way harder than what LSBot gave me. That's not fair, right? It's taken a guess. The question about whether or not you can discuss assessment question revisions with LSBot is no. We don't want any assessment conversation with LSBot. Okay, so like I think Launch School as a whole, we don't judge you. We're you know everything here is to help to educate, to try to get information into your brain, get habits into your fingers and into your life, right? Positive habits. The only time we judge you is during assessments and maybe a little bit during capstone admissions, right? But that's the only time. So don't use LSBot for those times, right? And this is unlike work, right? Work, you're constantly being judged, at least a little bit, right? So you ask a bad question on Slack, no worries, no big deal, right? No one's judging you. We're very good at like turning that off, so don't worry about it. At a workplace, if you ask a bunch of bad questions in Slack, you're getting judged, right? So this is a safe space. Take advantage of that. But don't ask assessment questions, revisions, whatever else was attached with assessments for LSBot.
Mm-hmm. But you can ask for it to generate practice things for you. I think the other day someone asked for it to make them a fake assessment for RB 129, and it gave them like 5 questions, and they were like, "Hey, the study guide says it has 20," and they were like, "Oh, okay, here's 20," and it was like, "No, the questions should be a mix of conceptual and code-based questions," and it was like, "Okay, sorry, here you go," and it was like, "No, it needs to have a code spike," and at the end, it actually had a really impressive, different from the assessments. You can push it as much as you want. It doesn't actually have the assessments. So, build an assessment for yourself, use it to your advantage. You can do that. Yeah, as long as you're not actually posting about assessment questions that you have seen.
Yep. No assessment information should go to LSBot.
Is it possible that launch school graduates interested in the AI field could help develop LSBot?
Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. It's possible to
That's
work
it?
on launchschool.com. I'll put it this way. I've had like an open thing for launch to work on launchschool.com. Do you know how many people actually do it? Very few. Very, very, very few, virtually none. And the reason is because by the time they're good enough, they go get jobs and like I'd rather work for Shopify. So yeah, yeah. We'll say yes to that question.
Here's a good one. Why did you choose to integrate the bot into Slack rather than build it into the LS web app? Is it just for the benefit of the public conversations?
I don't want to think about UX. It's just
We have to split our resources.
speed of development. I can't tell you how much work there is behind the scenes. So yeah, you want to help? Please come help. But there's so much work. So the last thing I want to think about was building like a UI thing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. This is a long question. Could you consider publishing a white paper on the making of the LS bot? What is the architecture like? What cloud service provider and Gen AI? It would be inspiring for those learning Python, which I assumed LSBot app was made possible with machine learning, that type of thing.
Sure.
Probably not.
Yeah, we'll do it. It's I would say this is just like launchschool.com. Um it's like building anything. It's a lot of iterations. The impressiveness is the iterative details, it's the care and attention. And I think that's where it is. I don't know that a white paper, if I showed you like any white paper, would be like fairly normal components, I think, right? As far as like I can tell you, for example, that the high level architecture that we use is called retrieval augmented generation, RAG architecture. Okay. Please don't Google and study that. Like you'll get there. Like I'm just telling you that, right? So like if you like we've had a capstone project that did that. We had one, right? And so it's that, but it's all the details within, right? Again, it's just like launchschool.com. It's all the little details within. Certainly not the design. It's not how pretty it is, right? And our content, right? What's awesome about content? It's like all the details within. Right. So I think that's what we're good at. Where it's not like innovative architecture, right? Nothing anyone else is doing. It's not like that. It's more We just care to a very high degree, and we apply it to what we're doing. So we're not like building a product that then is looking for like a solution, right? It's like, oh, maybe who's going to buy this? Who's going to use it? We have a very specific set of users with very specific problems and a very specific use case that we want to solve, right? Like I showed you that graph earlier. I'm literally just trying to improve on our mastery-based learning journey. That's all I'm trying to do, not trying to like do anything else. So it's very specific to that. So that's what makes it good, I think. But yeah, the architecture is fairly standard, I think. And I would say I based on my conversations with other companies, other practitioners, we are applying very, very new practices that's emerging now in this RAG space. So there's not like a ton of standard, like we're trying things and it could just not work, or we can change it a couple months later. Right. So there's that too. But yeah, we'll definitely write about it.
Cool. All right, well, we are winding down to the end of the hour. Most of our questions have been answered, so I think we'll wrap up there. I really encourage all of you to use LSBot. It's a tool for you guys, it's not for us. And also to give us feedback, because feedback is really driving what we choose to work on right now. If you noticed in the channels where LSBot is available that there was a little reminder that was posted for the first time this morning. There's a feedback form there. So tell us about bad things that happen. Tell us about annoying things. Tell us about good things. Give us your ideas, because if you give us a lot of feedback, then it's likely that your opinion will drive, where we take this in some way. Thanks a bunch to our panelists and everyone for coming. And I hope to see lots of usage of LSBot in the next few weeks.
Can I just say one last thing, Brandy, is
Yeah.
we're barely getting started here. So feedback, suggestions, all of that, open ears, and use LSBot. I want you to push it. I want you to, you'll never hear me, at least at this moment, complain about anything. Or if you do something, we'll be like, hey, you're doing too much. That's fine. No big deal, right? That's a good thing. So we are in that exploratory phase. That's super, super exciting, and more ideas and features are coming next year. Like we have infinite ideas, right? So trust me, like we've thought about a lot of stuff, and it's we're trying to set up a good foundation to like execute them. So it's an exciting time for sure. So I'm really happy and glad that you're all here for the ride.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.